As an American-oriented college, we didn't expect actually 10 years ago that we will have a think tank from US, from DC, specialized in, interested in Romania. This is very good news. Never happened before. And I think that we are more than happy to hear that finally Romania gets some specialized attention in terms of research, policy analysis, and strategy analysis. And Wess Mitchell probably is the best person to do that because he has extensive knowledge on this area, Central and Eastern Europe. He did a lot of work on that. You already saw his bio because I sent it to everybody in the school. And he's pretty much on our page in the way we think. Of course, working so much with US universities in this college, we were always convinced that the most important strategic connection of Romania is United States. But we have to go a little bit to a more specialized kind of debate and see why this is so important. Because sure, we feel that this is a particular important moment for US-Romanian relationship. And we know that things are happening around us, and we know that Romania is going through an important phase. Also, we feel that this is a moment that will influence our life for the next 30, 50 years. But maybe Wess will help us to get more precise kind of responses to our feelings, because feelings are good but not enough for us in a school of an empirical school as we would like to be. So this is a very interesting point for us, a very interesting moment, and we look forward to hear Wes' presentation. So Wes, please.
Yes.
Welcome again. And please.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to be here. This is my first trip to Cluj, and I've looked forward to this trip. CEPA, our institute, is delighted that we could be here today and that you guys would come. I'm happy to be at Romania's oldest and largest university, particularly as a Habsburg buff. I've looked forward to this trip. I've been to Bucharest many times, but not to Cluj. Thank you, Colleen, and the faculty, and obviously Rector Pop. But I especially want to thank my good friend Don Lothrop. I think many of you here know him. Don has been an outstanding supporter and mentor of our organization at CEPA for quite some time. A lot of you here know Don, but you probably don't realize the extent of the impact that he's achieving in Washington. Obviously, he's having an impact here with RomaniaOne, but he's also achieving an impact in Washington, in Congress and in the think tank community and universities and government and business, as kind of an ambassador at large for Romania, educating the United States on the importance of Romania and its potential and the potential of its people for the United States. And he's a founding father of our U.S.-Romania initiative at CEPA. This is the only project, to my knowledge, in the history of Washington think tanks that exclusively focuses on U.S.-Romania relations. And I can say a word about that later on. Don's RomaniaOne initiative is, I think, an inspiration to a lot of people in Washington. CEPA, as Colleen mentioned, is Washington's only think tank exclusively dedicated to the study of Central and Eastern Europe. Our mission at CEPA is to promote an economically vibrant, geopolitically stable, and a politically free Central and Eastern Europe with close and enduring ties to the United States. And today I want to talk about the second part of our mission statement, which is geopolitical stability. This is not a topic that is often discussed, particularly in places like Cluj, and at times like the elections, but I think it's a topic, as I said a moment ago, that should be discussed and thought about very often in this region. Within the course of the last 8 months, war has returned to this region. War has returned to Central and Eastern Europe. The largest country in Eastern Europe, a sovereign nation of 45 million people whose borders were guaranteed by the great powers, has been subjected to a sustained campaign of humiliation, state violence, destabilization, dismemberment at the hands of the Russian Federation. This country has been repeatedly invaded, its citizens have been murdered, its territory has been occupied. More than 3,000 people have been killed. Borders have been redrawn, a civilian airliner has been shot down. The West has entered into what's probably safe to say is a prolonged geopolitical contest with Russia. Maybe not a new Cold War, but something like it. In Eastern Europe, this region where you live, has once again in our lifetimes become a reactivated geopolitical frontier. All of this has happened in a country that's just a few hours from where we sit today. It's a country that has a 600-kilometer border with the state of Romania. Since the early phase of this crisis, most of the attention in Washington has been on North Central Europe, on the countries of Poland and the Baltic states. And I think that that's appropriate given the uniquely sharp security dilemma that those states face. But I want to talk today about the Ukraine war, what it means for the geopolitics of Southeastern Europe, and what it means for the people in the state of Romania. As I mentioned a moment ago, this is not a topic that we discuss very often. For most of our lifetimes, geopolitics is not something that we in the West, or Romanians in particular, have had to think very much about. For a quarter century now, we've lived through one of the most stable and transformative periods in human history. Fat years. Years of peace and prosperity that are free from the old chaos of geopolitics and great power war. Central Europe, in many ways, has been the ultimate symbol of that prosperity, of the post-Cold War era. This region has enjoyed greater safety, wealth accumulation, and political freedom than at any point in 1,000 years of Central European history, maybe ever. In the past 25 years, Romania has gone from being one of the most wretched and depressed of the captive nations of the Soviet bloc to what is perhaps the most successful democracy in the Balkans. Your GDP has increased by 150%. You've attracted more than $170 billion in foreign investment. You've achieved some of the fastest economic growth rates in the Western world, and you've now gone through 7, and I suppose soon to be 8, consecutive peaceful presidential elections, 7 consecutive peaceful parliamentary transfers of power. That success was made possible, first and foremost, by your courage and ingenuity as a people. But it was also made possible by an exceptional and historically rare set of geopolitical circumstances. For 25 years now, Romania has, for the first time in modern history, not faced a military threat in any substantial way from an outside power. You've had a security covenant with the most powerful nation on earth, and you've had the reforming and modernizing influence of the world's largest trade bloc. And this set of conditions has created, I think, for all of Central Europe, an almost Goldilocks or magical moment for this region, unique in its history, that has allowed you and your neighbors to heal from the wounds of communism and to focus inwardly on building up the human capital, the political institutions, the open economies of modern European states. And as I said a moment ago, from my perspective, no nation on earth deserved this opportunity more than Romania, the country, the victims of the Ceausescu police state. I think what the post-Cold War moment gave to Romania was a suspension of the normal laws of physics, of geography and power in this region. The very tragic geopolitical laws that have dominated so much of your history, what Churchill called the tortures which ancient poets and theologians reserve for the damned. The uniqueness of the last 25 years is that those conditions have not applied. To a greater extent, probably even than Poland, I think Romania has been able to forget about the dictates of strategy and statecraft. You've worked hard to get into NATO and the EU. You made contributions, very valiant contributions to US-led efforts in Afghanistan. But Romania has not had to worry about geopolitics at the most fundamental level of having to secure the state and its territory from invasion, coercion, or extinction at the hands of outside powers. This tranquil period of history has been a great accomplishment for Romania and for the West, and I think it's worth celebrating this year. This is the 25th anniversary of the 1989 revolution. But the conditions that made this vacation from history possible, I think, are coming to an end. The Russian invasion of Ukraine represents a direct and very violent challenge to the legal and territorial foundations of the European security order. This war signals changes to the southeastern European geopolitical landscape that I think will profoundly and probably permanently alter Romania's external environment in the years ahead in ways that will challenge you, that will challenge your continued success as an emerging democratic free market state. For the first time in a generation, Romania has a predator in its ecosystem. Under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, Russia has reemerged as a territorially unsatisfied, militarily capable, and ideologically anti-Western state that has both the intentions and the capabilities to overturn the post-1991 settlement in its own neighborhood. The Ukraine war showed, I think, that Russia is willing and able to play this new role that it's chosen for itself again in its history, not only using its normal techniques in this region of subversion and bribery and intimidation, but using military force against its neighbors. In many ways, I think Vladimir Putin is already waging war with the West, and in many ways, I think he's winning. I haven't seen anything in the responses of Western nations that would dissuade Vladimir Putin from using the same techniques he used in Crimea and eastern Ukraine to destabilize and terrorize and rearrange other states up and down the full length of the European eastern frontier. This resurgence of Russia comes at a moment when the Western order is wearing thin in your neighborhood in southeastern Europe. The United States is a treaty ally of Romania, and we are and will remain staunchly committed to your territorial integrity and to your defense. But the nature of our role in this region is changing. Our defense budgets are shrinking. The strategic pressures of managing multiple global regions are growing. And I think by virtually any measure, America's influence in southeastern Europe, our long-term influence, is being challenged and maybe even supplanted in a few cases by other powers. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that the other traditional motors of Western integration are also stalling. The Ukraine crisis showed the limits of the EU's ability to export its model of governance in contested geopolitical spaces against the will of a determined opponent like Russia, without possessing the traditional elements of geopolitical power. Inside the EU, the reform agenda has stalled in many EU countries. Populism and nationalism are on the rise in southeastern Europe. Euroscepticism and anti-Americanism are on the rise. And this is not happening in a vacuum. We live in a time of extraordinary global upheaval. Rising and revisionist powers are testing the resiliency of the Western-led international order on every frontier. The strong-arm tactics that Vladimir Putin has used in Crimea aren't all that different from Chinese maritime aggression and tactics in the South China Sea. Our power, American power, is resilient, but it's stretched thin at the moment. And I don't think we've ever had more numerous challengers to the Western order. So to put it in a very melodramatic way, I think the foundations of this post-Cold War world that I mentioned at the beginning, I think that they're shaking all around us. A lot of Romanians, I think, from my conversations and my times in Romania, I think a lot of Romanians, including some of your leaders, would listen to that and they would respond to it like a lot of people in the West. They would say, sure, things seem pretty bad. Ukraine is obviously a human tragedy. The EU is a mess, has always been a mess. The US has problems in Asia. But we in Romania, we have NATO, we have Article 5, we have US troops on Romanian soil, we have a growing economy, we have a booming energy sector. Now is not the time to upset investors with talk of geopolitics and war and these things. We'll raise our defense spending by a few decimal points, but eventually this crisis will fade and we'll go back to business as usual. I think that's a very tempting view, but I think it's misleading. In the years ahead, I believe that old-fashioned geopolitics will intrude on Romania in ways that could present grave challenges to your internal economic and political development. And based on current trends in this region, I see a handful of emerging elevated risks that I think Romania should be prepared for. The first is the most obvious, the risk of a reactivated eastern military frontier. Russia's continued advance on southern Ukraine places direct pressure on the Romanian frontier. In the years ahead, Romania should expect more frequent Russian violations of your airspace and territorial waters, and greater agitation and subversion in Moldova, Transnistria, and Gagauzia. Secondly, the risk of a repoliticized, maybe even eventually remilitarized Black Sea. The annexation of Crimea was not just a political event, it was a geopolitical event. It puts Russia in a position to disrupt Romanian maritime energy and economic development. 40% of Romanian territorial waters exist within the exclusive economic zone decided by the ICJ in 2009. 40% is now subject to renewed territorial claims, legal claims from the Russian Federation on the basis of its possession of Crimea. Even an unsuccessful challenge to that old 2009 ruling could change the risk climate for Romanian Black Sea energy development and impede Romania's plans for energy independence by 2020. Third, the risk of regional economic uncertainty. Investors don't like wars. Central Europe has thrived economically because 2 decades of stability have made it a safe haven among global emerging markets. If you lose that stability, even gradually, you lose some of the conditions that provide the basis for your future growth, probably more than you realize. And this is exactly what a recent EBRD report has warned will happen in Central Europe if the crisis in Ukraine stretches into a second year. Fourth, the risk of resurrected regional nationalism and irredentism. The Ukraine war reintroduced ethnic-based territorial revisionism to Central and Eastern Europe for the first time certainly for the first time since maybe the 1940s. I never would have expected to see it in my lifetime. I think irredentist nationalists from Transnistria to Transcarpathia, and maybe even a few in Transylvania, took note of Crimea as a precedent. And many of them are being actively encouraged by Vladimir Putin and Alexander Dugin. Fifth and finally, the risk of co-optation through corruption. Romania is a battleground state of the Balkans. The intensification of geopolitical competition in this region increases your attractiveness as a target for foreign powers who would use corruption in your political system or the unfinished business of your transition as a national security liability against you. In every direction around Romania, the Euro-Atlantic order is either in retreat or has faced recent setbacks. To your east, you have a sovereign nation that was moving closer to the European Union and was invaded. To your west, and north, you have the democratically elected leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, who has declared the death of liberal democracy. And he did this from a Romanian town. To your south, you have a fellow NATO EU member state that has been co-opted by Russian money and its own patent misgovernance to such an extent that it's on the verge of virtual state capture. And in this setting, I think Romania can no longer assume that the benign external conditions that you've had and that have allowed you to prosper for the last 25 years will continue indefinitely. You can no longer assume that you won't face an external threat to your interests or maybe even your territory. That you can't indefinitely assume that a single outside friendly power will be able to ensure the stability of your surrounding environment, or that unfriendly outside powers won't use your vulnerabilities against you. These are not the kind of risks that Romania, for most of our lifetimes, has had to worry about in any meaningful way. I think the danger that they present to Romania is the danger at Romania's current stage of political development, of arrested development. The danger that an inhospitable external environment would slow or impede your economic growth or political consolidation at just the moment when you're arriving at breakthrough growth and transition in your post-communist history. If all of this sounds far-fetched, consider the fate of interwar Romania, a country with enormous natural resources and political potential. It was the biggest winner from the post-1919 territorial settlement in this region, one of the world's largest oil producers behind the United States. The 1923 Romanian Constitution was said to be a model of liberal democratic ideals. Within a generation, that first experiment in Romanian democracy failed. The strategic environment shifted, Romanian leaders purloined state resources and lost the trust of the people, Western patrons vanished, revisionist powers filled the vacuum, Romanians gave up on democracy. That will not be the fate of Romania in our time. This is not the 1930s, and modern Romania has very strong foundations for a successful state. But Romania also won't be able to behave strategically as if it's still the early 2000s or late 90s. Your geopolitical surroundings are changing, and Romania will need to adapt to succeed in this environment. Put simply, I think to a greater extent than in the past, Romania will have to play a more direct role in ensuring the external preconditions for your internal success. Navigating that new environment, I think, will require three things of Romania that you didn't have to worry about at earlier stages in your transition. First, Romania will have to have the physical ability to shape its external environment. A capable, modern military is the precondition to any future Romanian strategy in this region. The Romanian military today is widely respected in both Romania and the United States. Your troops died alongside our soldiers in Afghanistan, and I can tell you from my brother-in-law who fought there that they have enormous respect for Romanians among our allies in the field. However, it also bears saying that the Romanian military today reflects post-Cold War strategic realities. Small budgets, in recent years a preoccupation with out-of-area missions like ISAF, and a prioritization of personnel over capabilities. Some Romanian forces today still use the same equipment that they had in 1988 when I was in the 5th grade, and Romania was in Warsaw Pact. The modernization program that Romania began in 2007 is a very good military modernization program. It is stalling. You've completed 15 out of 85 planned acquisitions. I think this would be justifiable for a small state in a quiet environment, and I think that neither applies to Romania. You're not a small state, and you're not in a quiet environment. You're the second largest NATO frontline state. You're the anchor of NATO's southeastern flank, and alongside Poland, you're the linchpin of Western strategy for this entire region. Romania needs to reevaluate the priorities of its military modernization, like many states in the West are now doing, in light of the post-Ukraine war landscape. I think the increased defense spending is a step in the right direction, but comprehensive reform and modernization are needed, similar to what Poland began several years ago. So less spending on personnel, more on capabilities, less focus on exotic weapon systems and out-of-area operations, more practical focus on area denial capabilities to strengthen deterrence against Crimea-style threats. Second, Romania needs a strategy for translating its national success story into regional leadership. Romania is the largest U.S. ally in a traditional strategic sense. You're the largest U.S. ally for 1,500 miles between Poland and Israel. You're the only local power that has the size, potential, and credibility to project stability in NATO's southeastern flank. I think Romanian strategy for doing this over time should be built on areas of potential and emerging national advantage for Romania: military security, energy security, democratic governance. The most immediate of those, I think, is energy. By the year 2020, Romania is on track to be producing more energy than more oil and gas than both it and Moldova can consume together. That's good news for Central Europe and for Europe, but Romania lacks a long-term strategy for systematically developing that opportunity. Romanian regional energy security would go beyond the current focus on encouraging offshore and onshore production. It would take steps now to make production sustainable and exportable at a regional level. It would address vulnerabilities in infrastructure, accelerate liberalization of the energy market, bring accountability to state-owned distribution facilities, and create barriers to Russian and Chinese acquisition of strategic assets. Third, and finally, Romania has to succeed as a democracy. Not just succeed conspicuously. National security and governance are intimately linked. That's true in all countries, including the United States. The difference for Romania is that the stakes here are higher. You live in a hostile environment, and precisely because your success is crucial to the Western order in this region, you're more of a target. You're more of a target for outside forces who would use the unfinished business of your democratic transition against you. So your immune system has to be even stronger against those forces. Romania's ability to overcome corruption is inextricably linked to your success or failure, not just as a democracy, but as a state altogether. Asking your leaders for better governance, for cleaner courts, prosecuting bribes, insisting on integrity and transparency in the public space is one of the most patriotic things that everyday Romanians can do, as much as it would be in the United States. So the common theme in all these areas, I think, is leadership. I think that Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban are both putting forward different versions of the same thesis. And I think that thesis is that the democratic order that we built in Central Europe after 1989 was temporary, that it can be challenged and even replaced if one is willing to bend the rules, whether it's by using dirty money or tanks or ballot boxes. The success of Romania would be the ultimate counterproof to that thesis. Romania is proof that Western ideals and institutions work at a moment in history when we desperately need examples of the Western success story worldwide. Think for a moment what the future would look like from Vladimir Putin's perspective if Romania achieved its full potential. The sixth largest country in Europe with 20 million people and the third largest gas reserve in the EU as a consolidated democracy in the heart of Southeastern Europe with stable institutions, rising standard of living, steady Western international investment, and a booming energy sector. That's a strong Atlanticist Romania that would radiate stability and energy solutions and democracy to its neighbors, and I think that's the vision that should inspire Romanians today. This is a Romania that the West needs strategically in our time. I think the years ahead are likely to see greater global geopolitical and ideological turmoil than any of us would have imagined at the onset of the post-communist transitions 25 years ago. Speaking as an American, I can tell you that we will need mature allies in global regions like Central Europe that are capable of anchoring their regions in security and modeling the success of the Western order. Our strategic and economic commitment will be greatest to those allies that succeed in these areas. The more you succeed in Romania, the more the United States will be present in your country and in your region strategically. And I'll just close by saying that I referred a moment ago to interwar Romania. It was said of interwar Romania that it was a European necessity, a state of necessity. I think that's true of Romania today. You're a state of necessity for America and for the Western alliance in Southeastern Europe. I think there have been times in Romania's strategic history when the safest thing for you to do was to keep a low profile and act like a smaller state than you actually are. I don't think this is one of those moments. I think this is a moment when Romanians need to be subjects of history rather than objects of history. A moment to lead in your region, in governance, in security, in energy, despite the fact that everything around you is moving in the opposite direction. And I believe, on an analytical basis, Romania is ready for that moment. And on a personal basis, based on the time I've spent in Romania, you have steadier institutions, greater wealth, and better allies than you've ever had, and certainly than the interwar Romanian state had. And I think the past 25 years have provided all of the ingredients that you need for your success. All you need is confidence and seizing that opportunity. I think the choice is ultimately yours, of course, but I think the West, a lot depends in the West on the choice that Romania makes in this region. We need you to succeed for your future and for ours, and I hope that you will. So, thank you.
In our country, think tanks are the place where there's a steady body of knowledge. That is the human brain of American policy. And so getting involved with CEPA, to the extent that any of you do, you're contributing, much more than you think. Most Romanians think decisions in America are made by politicians. Politicians are simply informed by these think tanks. CEPA's approach to Poland and in the Baltics and now to Romania is to form networks of thinkers. We call it here our Think Romania Network. We have a network of 40 people who were really interested in Romania, who wrote the first CEPA report, which is largely on governance and anti-corruption. Wess is forming 2 more Think Romania networks. One is on military strategy and one is on energy security. Those will probably be 20 or less people. And so that I would encourage people who are here who want to be part of a network of Romanians around the world writing a Romanian strategy, to be open to that. And in this Think network, you can be in a university, you can be a citizen, you can be a business people. It's really open to anybody. As Colleen said, unfortunately, Romania doesn't have a strategy, and we have to have one. And I think much of what CEPA does will be a strategy for American policy towards Romania and the basis for a Romanian strategy. So I would just plant that seed here that those of you who want to be part of a Think Romania network on governance, energy security, or military security, let them know. I am absolutely certain that the Russians will not invade Romania because America will defend Article 5. I'm absolutely sure about that. But it could be much, much better. It could be much, much better. If we actually, when the story of the DNA is told in Washington, it's, oh my goodness, that's great. If we have a Romania that has a vibrant anti-corruption institution, if we have a Romania with a civil society of Romanian people who are claiming their rights, you don't become a European citizen when you get a right, you become one when you claim it. And so if we see Romanian civil society saying, hell no, you can't pass that law, Parliament, you can't do it, you see a civil society. And then if we have a strategy for our country, and the strategy may say, hey, listen, America, we need $10 billion to build energy infrastructure from the Black Sea, to Europe. Will you give it to us? In that strategy, in the context of a strong anti-corruption agency and an active civil society, I think we'll get it. So it's a synergistic thing. I mean, we're going to protect that, so it's not. You don't have to do any more to earn our trust. Your soldiers have earned the trust of America in Afghanistan, and every time an American meets a Romanian, or almost every time, you earn our trust. But I think we could get so much more out of America than we get besides military protection. Because as Wes said, you're so important. I mean, we need a democratic success story.
If I were Vladimir Putin and I looked at a map of Central and Eastern Europe, I would see in the north a very hostile environment with Poland and the Baltic states arming and resistant to me. In Southeastern Europe, I would see a pretty pliant universe of potential where the Western Balkans are already perforated with Russian influence and money. We talked about Bulgaria, you see Serbia, Srpska Republika, and really with the exception of Romania, the region is trending very negatively. And I think that makes this region the blind spot. So I hope that we will help to preclude Russia from doing in Moldova what it did in Ukraine by focusing more on Ukraine.
But I hope that this is going to be just the first presence of Wess here. The school, our college will, offer a strategic or structural partnership with CEPA, if this is of interest, and trying to put together the expertise that this school has and of course CEPA has. And I think that there is a common ground in which we can work in the future. I think that it was a very interesting and informative meeting for all of us, not as long as we would like to, but again, maybe this is just the beginning of a series of meetings. So again, Wes, thank you very much for visiting SPAC, as we call our school, faculty. We appreciate very much that and the level of the presentation. Don, again, thank you for organizing and helping us to organize this, and Paul again for setting up all the details. Thank you, everybody, and I hope to see you again in the same kind of format in the future. Thank you.
I just want to thank you for your questions. I mean, I told this character, come to Cluj, you're going to be impressed, right? We think the same way, right? And so every single question asked here today was thoughtful and rich and good. And I'm glad you got to hear the power of the minds in this community. So thanks for your questions.
And I'll just echo that and say thank you for having me. Thank you for your hospitality, Colleen. I love coming to Romania. And thank you for your interest and your questions. My message to you guys is that we're committed to you. Places like CEPA fight for this relationship. Romania has come a long ways. Keep up the good work. You have the trust and commitment and investment of the United States and I think the Western world. And I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be here and glad that the United States has such a strong ally in this region. So thank you.
Thank you. You don't need the consulate as much as you have this college in Cluj.
And